There's something about her eyes, Detective Lila Monroe had said to herself as she flipped through the pages of the weather-worn diary, as if they'd been trying to scream the truth long before her lips ever did. It started with a call. A neighbor had heard a loud crash, followed by a piercing scream that abruptly stopped, like someone had pressed mute on a horror film mid-scene. It was just past midnight on a damp Thursday when officers arrived at apartment 4B on Maple Street. The front door was ajar. Inside, the air felt thick, not with heat, but with a kind of sadness that clung to the walls like mold. Furniture was overturned, a shattered lamp lay in the hallway, and silence hung oppressively. And then they found her. Camille Devereux, 32 years old. Single. A quiet tenant. Found face down in a pool of blood in her bedroom. No signs of forced entry. On the surface, it looked like a tragic domestic dispute. But it wasn't the scene that unsettled Detective Monroe most. It was what she found later, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in Camille's bedroom closet. A diary. Bound in burgundy leather, the edges frayed, the pages warped slightly from years of being handled, or wept on. At first, it was ordinary. A woman's musings on work, loneliness, romantic woes. But then, page after page, it changed. Grew darker, more paranoid, obsessed. Camille had secrets, ones that weren't just hers. And as Lila read, her blood chilled. I think they're following me, watching me. I know what I saw in that house. They told me to forget it. I said I would. But I haven't. Camille had been living a double life. One that ultimately may have gotten her killed. The final entry was dated just 2 nights before her death. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. He said no one would believe me anyway. But if you're reading this, it means he lied. Please. Please don't let him get away with it. The question wasn't just who had killed Camille. It was what secret had she been keeping, and why had she been silenced? And as Monroe turned the final page, she found something even more chilling than Camille's last words. A photograph. One that had been deliberately torn. The only visible face? Detective Monroe's. Who took that photo, and why was Monroe in it? Was she unknowingly part of the story Camille had died for? Detective Lila Monroe sat frozen in the dim light of her office. The torn photograph rested on the desk before her, weighted down at the corners by evidence bags and case files. Her own face stared back at her, caught in a candid moment. Taken from a distance, her expression unreadable, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the frame. She didn't remember the moment, didn't even recognize the background. But there was no mistaking it. Camille Devereux had possessed a photo of Lila, and had hidden it with her diary. The implications made her stomach twist. Lila wasn't just investigating Camille's murder. Somehow, she was connected to it. She had the photo sent to forensics for metadata, hoping the digital fingerprint could reveal a time or location. But until then, she needed answers, and fast. Her first stop was Camille's workplace, a local publishing house downtown. According to HR, Camille had been a quiet but efficient copy editor. No recent conflicts, no complaints. But her manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Rita Shore, hesitated when Lila asked if Camille had ever mentioned feeling unsafe. She came in late one morning, maybe 3 weeks ago, Rita recalled, rubbing her temples. She looked like she hadn't slept. I asked if she was okay. She said someone had been inside her apartment. Nothing stolen, just moved. Like someone wanted her to know they'd been there. Lila nodded, chills creeping up her arms. Did she say who she thought it was? No, Rita paused. But she started locking her office drawers. Kept a file folder with her everywhere she went. Even brought it to the break room during lunch. She never let it out of her sight. What was in it? Rita shook her head. Never saw. But I think it had something to do with her old job. Old job. She worked for a private research firm before us. One of those companies with no real online presence. Government adjacent. Maybe. She never talked about it. Only ever said it was a mistake. That night, Lila dug deeper into Camille's background. Her resume had been clean, but not complete. public records showed a 3-year employment gap between 2015 and 2018. And during that time, Camille had lived in a completely different state, in a small town called Belridge. A town Lila had never heard of. But Belridge rang a bell. She opened the drawer of her filing cabinet and pulled out an old case file, a personal one. The kind she'd never been able to solve. A missing girl, Emily Strauss, age 9, vanished during a visit to her grandmother's home in Belridge. The case had gone cold. Lila hadn't thought about it in years, until now. She flipped through the file and stopped cold when she reached a photo of the house Emily had disappeared from. It was the same house in the background of the torn photo found in Camille's diary. Lila stared at the image in disbelief. Camille's secret might be connected to a girl who had gone missing nearly 7 years ago. But what could a lonely copy editor in the city know about a child's disappearance in a rural town she'd supposedly left behind? And why had Camille lied about her past? Lila must go to Belridge. But someone's already watching, someone who knows she's digging where she shouldn't, and they're not going to let her leave without a warning. The town of Belridge sat nestled between dense pine forests and a lazy, winding river. Peaceful on the surface, but to Detective Lila Monroe, it felt like a place holding its breath. She arrived just after dawn. The roads were nearly empty. A gas station clerk gave her directions to the Strauss property with a wary glance, as if the name alone carried weight. The Strauss house had been abandoned for years, wooden shutters falling off, porch swing hanging by one rusted chain. But something about it tugged at Lila's memory. Not just from the case file. It felt familiar. The backyard was overgrown. Ivy crawled up the sides of the house like veins. And when Lila stepped onto the back porch, a floorboard creaked beneath her boot. She crouched down instinctively, and that's when she saw it. A rusted nail, holding down the edge of what looked like plastic. She pried it up. A torn plastic envelope was buried under a loose plank. Inside, she found damp, faded papers, and a photograph. This one wasn't torn. It showed a group of people, 5 adults, standing in front of the very house she was at. Camille was among them. Younger, thinner, wearing a security badge. Next to her stood a man with salt and pepper hair and a lab coat. Scribbled on the back, Staff Retreat, Project Brightfall, April 2016. Brightfall? She'd never heard of it. Lila carefully slid the items into an evidence bag, but as she rose, her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. Turn around, detective. Her body froze. Slowly, she turned, and saw no one. She scanned the trees. No footsteps, no movement. Just the haunting quiet of Belridge. Then another text. Go home. You don't know what you're opening. Lila backed toward her car, heart thudding in her chest. She didn't know who was watching, but they'd known exactly where she was. They were close. Back in her motel room, she made calls, dug deeper. Hours of searching led her to a dark corner of the internet. An old whistleblower blog, now defunct, but still cached. One post caught her eye. Brightfall was never a retreat. It was a cover. What happened in that house didn't stop there. They buried the evidence. But she kept some. I think she's scared. I think they're after her. Posted in 2018. No name. But a user photo showed a partial face. A woman. And Lila recognized her instantly. It was Camille. Camille had tried to expose something. But what? The documents she'd buried, the photo, the diary. It was all part of something deeper. Lila needed more, and she knew where to get it. She called the county archives and arranged to view any records related to the Strauss property. Land ownership, permits, anything. The clerk hesitated when Lila gave the address. There's no property registered under that address, the clerk said finally. What do you mean? Lila asked. The Strauss house isn't on record, he said. As far as Belridge is concerned, that property doesn't exist. A house that doesn't exist. A project no one talks about. And someone in Belridge is determined to keep Lila from finding the truth. Even if it means silencing her, too. Detective Lila Monroe couldn't sleep. The motel room in Belridge felt colder than it should have. She kept glancing at the window, half expecting someone to be watching. Her mind buzzed with questions. What was Project Brightfall? Why did Camille hide her past? And what happened at that house, now supposedly erased from every public record? By morning, she made a decision. If the Strauss house didn't officially exist, then whatever happened there had been buried on purpose. And if Camille had lived there, worked there, and later died while trying to reveal the truth, Lila couldn't walk away now. She needed someone local, someone who had lived in Belridge during those years. So she visited the town library. An older woman named Mrs. Evelyn Hale was the head librarian. She wore horn-rimmed glasses, moved slowly, but her eyes were sharp as flint. Lila showed her the photograph of the staff retreat. Evelyn went quiet. "I haven't seen that picture in years," she said softly, then tapped Camille's face. She was one of them. They all worked out of that house. Scientists, researchers, said they were running environmental studies. I didn't believe it. That place gave me chills. What were they really doing? Lila asked. Evelyn hesitated. I heard rumors about experiments, not on animals, on people. Lila frowned. What kind of people? Evelyn leaned in. Children. Lila's stomach turned. There was a girl, Evelyn whispered. Maybe 8 or 9. Quiet, pale. No one ever saw her leave the house. She used to stand in the upstairs window at night, just staring. Locals started calling her the girl in the window. Lila's pulse quickened. Was her name Emily? Evelyn's face fell. That name was never spoken. But one day, the girl was gone. Just like that. And a week later, the house was boarded up, and the staff vanished. Like they were never there at all. Lila showed Evelyn the diary. The librarian's hands trembled as she skimmed a few lines. She wasn't just scared, Evelyn murmured. She was guilty. Later that day, Lila returned to the Strauss property. This time, she wasn't alone. She'd brought a crowbar, a flashlight, and her service weapon. She pried open a side door, which moaned in protest as it gave way. The air inside was heavy, as if the walls still remembered everything that had happened. Dust covered the floors. Old lab equipment lay abandoned in the main room. Desks, monitoring stations, sealed black crates. Lila found an old fuse box and got just enough power to light the hallway. She moved toward the stairs, past rooms filled with broken monitors and cabinets marked with strange symbols. Then she heard it. A thump. From upstairs. Lila froze. Another thump. This time, louder, followed by a dragging sound. Hand on her weapon, she crept up the stairs, flashlight sweeping from wall to wall. The hallway above was darker, the floorboards soft with rot. Then she saw the door at the end of the hall, slightly open, and behind it, movement. Lila pushed the door slowly. The beam of her flashlight caught something in the corner. Something small. A child's mattress, long decayed. And beside it, a stack of drawings. Dozens of them. Crude sketches made with pencil. All of them showing the same thing. A woman standing at the edge of the woods, watching the house. Each drawing showed her face getting closer. Until the final one. Lila dropped it in shock. The final drawing was of her, labeled in a child's handwriting. She came back. Lila never knew the girl. So why had the girl drawn her face, years before they ever met? Unless they had met, and Lila didn't remember. Detective Lila Monroe sat on the rotting floor of the Strauss house, her hands trembling as she held the final drawing. She came back. The crude lines capture her face in uncanny detail. Her sharp chin, the curl in her hair, even the freckle near her left eye. There was no mistaking it. The child who drew this knew her. But how? How could a missing girl from Belridge have known her before she ever joined the force? Unless Lila's breath caught. Memories she'd buried long ago, fragments like shards of broken glass, began piercing through. A wooded path, a woman screaming, a locked door, and a face. A little girl's face, pale and bruised, staring at her from behind a thick pane of glass. She hadn't just read about Belridge in case files. She'd been here before. 25 years ago, when she was barely 10. Her family had visited a distant cousin, someone who lived just outside Belridge. It had been summer. She remembered chasing fireflies in the woods. Then, getting lost. She'd wandered too far, found a strange house deep in the forest. Not the Strauss house. A different one, older. She remembered being pulled away by a man, and a voice whispering in her ear. You didn't see anything. You never saw anything. Her parents had said she dreamt it, that it was her imagination. But she hadn't imagined the girl in the window. And now, she was starting to think that girl wasn't Emily Strauss. It was someone else entirely. Lila collected the drawings and began photographing the room. But something felt off. The air was shifting. Suddenly, she heard a whisper behind her. Lila. She spun, flashlight jerking. No one. Leah. Her name again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was coming through a vent in the wall. Lila knelt beside the metal grate. It was old, rusted, but something faint echoed from deep inside the duct. She pried it open with her knife and shone the light in. The vent led to a crawl space. Heart pounding, she climbed in. The narrow passage smelled of mildew and dust. But after a few feet, it widened into a small room, a hidden space between walls. Inside, a mattress, a few torn books, and a tape recorder. Lila picked it up and hit play. Static buzzed, then a voice crackled through. Camille's. If you're hearing this, I'm probably gone. I was part of Brightfall. Not by choice. They told me we were helping children with trauma, that we were studying memory suppression. But it wasn't therapy. It was control. They tested drugs, hypnosis. They erased things. And I think they tried it on her. The girl in the window. Her name wasn't Emily. That was the name they gave her. Her real name. Static cut in. Then a final sentence. He's still alive. He's still running it. And he's closer than you think. Click. The recorder went silent. Lila felt a cold breeze sweep through the crawlspace. She turned to leave, when a hand reached into the vent behind her and yanked the recorder from her fingers. She screamed, scrambling back toward the light. As she emerged from the wall, she caught a glimpse. A man, tall, masked by shadow, vanishing down the hall. But on the wall where he'd stood, a single word scrawled in black marker. Forget. Lila now knows Brightfall's experiments weren't just on children, they were on her. And the man behind it all is still watching, ready to finish what he started. Detective Lila Monroe didn't sleep that night. She sat in her car outside the Strauss house, replaying Camille's final recording over and over in her mind. The girl in the window hadn't been Emily Strauss. Emily was the cover story, a convenient fiction for what had really happened inside that house, and perhaps others like it. The truth was buried behind layers of memory suppression, manipulation, and threats. But Lila was remembering. Not just the visit to Belridge as a child, but the clinic. Flashes returned. White walls, cold metal chairs, bright lights, a man with steel gray hair and a voice that said her name like it was a code. And something else. A room of mirrors, children sitting in front of screens, needles. She'd been a subject, part of Brightfall. Camille had tried to help her remember. That's why she'd followed Lila. That's why she'd kept the photograph. And that's why Camille had died. Someone wanted Lila to forget, but she wouldn't. The next morning, Lila drove to the address listed on Camille's old employee records, the Brightfall Research Group. It had long since closed, but the corporate trail led her to a private security firm in New Haven, a place with deep government ties and a list of investors that read like a classified document. One name stood out, Dr. Howard Kessler. She searched for photos of him, and her breath caught. It was him, the man from the lab, the voice in her fractured memories. The man Camille had stood beside in the staff retreat photo. He was still alive, And according to a recent news article, he now ran a non-profit focused on innovative cognitive therapy for trauma survivors. Lila knew what that meant. He just renamed the experiment. She booked an appointment at his center under a false name. When she arrived, the receptionist barely looked up as she signed in. Kessler's office was clean and sterile, filled with books and awards. He stood when she entered, older now, but unmistakable. "Miss Dane," he greeted, extending a hand. "Or should I say, Detective Monroe." She didn't take his hand. "You remember me," she said coldly. He smiled faintly. "I remember all of them. You experimented on us. On children. You erased memories. Controlled us." He tilted his head. "You're looking at it wrong. We liberated you. You came to us broken. We helped you forget the worst parts. That's not evil. That's mercy." "Then why did Camille try to expose you?" His expression darkened. "She broke the chain of trust. She stole classified files. She knew the consequences. So you killed her?" "I didn't need to," he said calmly. "Fear did that for me." Lila's hand moved to her holster, but Kessler raised a remote in his hand. "One click," he said, "and every hard drive in this building wipes clean. No proof. No files. No recordings. Nothing. And you'll leave here looking like another unstable ex-patient." She stared him down, then pulled something from her coat. Camille's diary, now fitted with a hidden transmitter, already streaming to multiple encrypted servers. "I don't need your files," she said. "I brought my own." Kessler's face fell. Sirens sounded in the distance. Backup was already en route. As agents burst through the door, Lila turned to him one last time. "You didn't make me forget," she said. "You just made me angrier." 3 months later, Lila stood over Camille's grave. The trial was still underway. Kessler and several others were indicted on charges ranging from illegal experimentation to manslaughter. Camille's diary had become the centerpiece of the case. Her handwriting, her entries, all a damning portrait of the darkness they tried to bury. But one question remained. The girl in the drawings, the one who knew Lila, who had drawn her as a child. Her body had never been found. There were whispers that she survived, that she escaped. Some say she's still out there, a woman now, hiding in the corners of a world that forgot her. Others believe she was never real. But Lila knows better, because every few weeks, she receives a letter. No return address. Each one contains a new drawing. The latest one showed Lila standing on a cliffside, looking out at the ocean. Behind her, drawn in a child's hand, a single phrase. "Thank you for remembering me." Camille's diary was more than a confession. It was a lifeline, a trail of breadcrumbs left behind by a woman desperate to undo the sins of her past. Too late to save herself, but just in time to wake the truth.